One of the plants I'd like to talk to you about, well, one of the kind of the groups of plants I'd like to talk to you about is succulents, because as a gardener, when I come home, I don't always have the energy or the impetus to actually do anything garden related. And so these guys, they sit in my house and they do what they do without any intervention or me looking at them in the slightest, and they just get on with it. But occasionally they do need repotting. And this one, this poor sad specimen, believe it or not, is actually still alive. If you look very carefully, there is still some green going on here. And its name is, and I have to look at this, is Andromyscus maculatus. Andromyscus maculatus. And what it should look like, because fortunately I had the foresight to take a leaf off, is it should look like that. And that's the only remaining viable plant of the part of the plant that I have, and it's not actually growing in a big bit. That's a cotyledon that it's growing alongside. I literally just pulled the leaf off and just lay it on the compost, because that's the bonus with succulents. That's what you can do. And actually you can see this cotyledon is telling me that it's desperate to be repotted, because it's got a root coming out of the side just there. And that's what I love about succulents, is they literally just root out of nothing. And if a leaf falls off, this is what happens. As you can see here, little leaves fall off and you get baby plants everywhere. So I have got lots of baby plants to pot up, and I'm being ably assisted by Phil Cat, who is doing the very important job of leaning against things and looking cat-like and almost as still as a statue. Yes. So what else have we got here? We've got a wonderful aloe. Now this chap here, I think, is possibly a gasteria rather than an aloe. It's not a Haworthia, because Haworthias don't have this point on the back. And it's just not right for an aloe. But I'll have to look that up. So I have a Gasteria verrucosa, which I can compare it to. But there's another one here, and I've forgotten its name offhand. But this chap here is the carrion flower. It's brilliant. It looks like nothing at the moment, but it will look like something when it puts out a flower. And you can see the remains of the last flower just here. And trust me, it absolutely reeked. It's an amazing plant, but oh my god, it stinks when it flowers. Such a shame. Anyway, so I will show you how I expect to pot these on in a second. So just get a view of Phil sitting beside the pan. Now, with the pan that I plan on potting this up into, I've just covered over the drainage hole there with just a piece of broken pot, really, because we're going to need good drainage, but obviously we don't want the soil and everything else to flood out through the bottom, because what we're going to use is potting grit for the first inch or so. And that's the potting grit. It's quite fine, and it will just flood out through the bottom unless that's covered over. So I want to fill it up to the point where I can't see that terracotta. I don't really need that bit of conifer in there. And so that's what we've got. And this is the RHS Gardener's Collection Horticultural Potting Grit, but there are other types of potting grit available, and it's always worth double checking what size. So you can get what's known as potting grit that is actually pea shingle, but this is proper potting grit, suitable for cacti and succulents and other plants that need fast drainage, a bit like my auricula collection, like that. So they all need fast drainage. But we're also going to add this stuff, which is perlite. So perlite is expanded volcanic rock, believe it or not, and it's very light. It's not particularly water absorbent. It just allows the water to drain through, but it does hold nutrients, so it does have that for its advantage. And it's just a little bit better at opening out soil than the potting grit, which can sometimes lock together. So the smaller pieces of grit lock together like that, whereas the larger pieces, they tend to have bigger gaps in between. But the perlite, it doesn't matter if it locks together because it's permeable. It will allow the water to pass through. Does that make sense? I hope so. Okay, so I'm going to mix up my potting mix. If only you could see the effort that I'm going to get this shot. I've got the camera tied to it. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to tear this one apart. So this one here has one main plant and two pups. And I don't know what it's going to look like in the middle. So it'll be interesting for all of us. I've got myself a little tray here. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to pop this up into this, because they like low flat trays because they spread out. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it apart gently. And can you see that? It's coming apart very easily, but you can see the little white roots there at the bottom. There we go. And this one here. And this plant I bought from the side of the road for £2. There's a lovely lady selling plants at the side of the road, and this was one of them. I'm just going to have a quick investigate, make sure I'm not potting up any nasties before I pop it back into some compost. That looks nice and clean. What we're looking for is any little white grubs with dark coloured heads, which are vine weevil. Vine weevil are evil. And you can see the lady who's potted this up, she's used vermiculite, and she's also used perlite, because I can see the shine of the mica. I don't know if you can see that. And she's used grit and all sorts. So yeah, she's, to be fair, she's quite good. She knows what she's doing. But I'm going to put that to one side for a moment. Okay, and what we've got here is my bucket of nice things. What you can't see is Phil's sat down there. Phil is my constant gardening companion. It's wonderful. And I'm using the same potting grit as we used at the base there, just to add to it and open it up a little bit more. And then I'm going to get some perlite. I'm quite generous with this because we want it to be very well drained, and I probably won't pop this on now for another couple of years, because I've got succulents that have been in the same bag now for almost 20 years. They've been in the same pot, and I just give them a liquid feed every now and again. Right, I'm going to grab some Osmocote, and got it. Now this particular stuff is sold as being fruit and veg. I don't use it on fruit and veg because it's a chemical, and although chemicals do have their place in gardening, it's not in stuff that you eat. So, and yes, everything is a chemical, but a synthetic chemical, shall we say. So what I tend to use for my fruit and veg would be just bloody good homemade compost. Little bit of animal manure if you can get stuff that's been tested against the aminopyralid, the weed killer that is in horse manure and cattle manure. But really, if you're going to add anything, I would probably just add chicken manure, pelleted chicken manure, because that way you're pretty damn sure you know what's coming, rather than, you know, sort of the lottery that has become cattle and horse manure with aminopyralid contamination. Anyway, so this stuff, the trade name is Osmocote, and I know I've shown you it before. This one is green and purple. They like to give you different colours. So I'm just going to add this, and I'm quite generous with this because it's a slow release granular. You can't really overfeed with it. This will last 12 to 18 months. The different colours basically run out at different times, and it contains 14% nitrogen, which is quite high, ammonium nitrogen, of which is 8.5, and nitrate nitrogen, which is 5.5. Its NPK is 14, 10, 15. That's really quite high. But it doesn't, it says 7 months, so okay, yeah. Add to the composter at the rate of 3 grams per litre of compost. Level teaspoon is approximately 7 grams. Well, I've got quite a few litres of compost there. So I always find with these pelleted ones, you can be quite generous, to be honest with you. So, I don't know if you can see that. I'll mix it up a bit better. Gritty. That's what we want it to look like. So just make sure I've got it properly mixed up, and I've added some old compost in this as well, so because I like to reuse my compost. And I've got a robin giving me such a hard time here. Anyway, so I'm going to nestle that in there, and I'm going to fill it up to about that level, and then I'm going to get my wonderful aloe, sorry, can't resist that joke. And what I want to do is I want to nestle these in so that they're on a level. Can you see that? I want them about there, just literally just above. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up topping this with grit. So I'll place that where I want it. And the next one, trying not to damage the leaves too much, and trying not to damage the roots too much. That one's managed to get compost all over it. How messy. And backfill just around that whilst I make a hole for the next one. By separating these, you might be thinking, why am I doing that? I'm encouraging them to put out pups, and pups are the babies that form around the base of these particular type of succulents. So once I've got them to that stage, and the compost is very, very loose around them, and just gently push it down. Now, if you get compost in the rosette like I've got there, you don't really want to leave that in there because it can rot the actual rosette. So whilst the compost is still relatively dry, I'm going to do this, and close your eyes when you do it, because otherwise obviously you're going to end up compost in your eyes. Nobody needs that. And in your mouth and nose. Right, yes, I'm happy with that. And you can just tap that. Get the compost to go in around the rest of it. Obviously don't tap it with anything other than the palm of your hand because it's terracotta and it will crack the bowl, and that's the last thing you want. And you see, that has allowed me to push the compost in a little bit further so it's nice and firm. I'll continue doing that, and I will top up with a bit of grit. So I really do need a remote control. And so in the great scheme of things, here's what I prepared earlier, or at least something I prepared earlier. So we're going to just fill in between these with compost. And I'm going to grit. I'm going to be quite generous with it because, let's face it, I can afford to be generous with grit when grit gives me better succulents. You see, I'm not too bothered about it landing on the leaves because we can always dust them off later, and I'm quite happy about it spilling about the sides because it's only going into compost, which I'm going to use for more succulents. And I want to work it right underneath, right down the sides of these succulents, like so. And just beat it up a little bit. Now, when you tap on the sides like this, everything will head towards where you're tapping. So if you want the grit to go in a certain direction, you tap on the side where you want that grit to go. And are we happy with that? That's looking much happier already, isn't it? Why do plants always look bigger when you pop them on? But yeah, I think, because the trouble with me is I can fiddle with these things forever. I'm a bit OCD like that. So I'm just going to give it a quick blow just to make sure. So close the eyes again. There we go. I'm happy with that. And I'm going to give it a quick water before I take it back inside. And there's that one potted up. But before we go anywhere else, I'm just going to show you how to separate this cotyledon and this andromystus, or however you say it. So a couple of dead leaves on there. Now, this poor cotyledon has been so badly treated. I do treat them so badly. Now, I was given this back from a present that I gave to Philippa. So I've just given that a quick shake, and the andromystus has just literally fallen out. And if you can see, just there, trying to get it to focus, can't get it to focus. But yes, you can just about see it's got some roots coming out there. Yeah? Okay. And you can see that the bottom of that leaf is just starting to lose its succulence, shall we say. So basically that has been used as a food source for the baby shoot, which is coming out there. But we're going to end up with two plants. So we're going to end up with this cotyledon. Now we've got two cotyledons at work. We've got cotyledon undulata, and this is a different cotyledon, and I can't remember which one it is. But the one that I kind of really want another cutting of is the undulata, and this one has got this wonderful farina on the leaves. It's farina means like a white dust. It's like a white hairs, and if you touch it, you see it marks it. But obviously you don't want to touch it, so we try and avoid touching it. Now we have another wonderful terracotta pot, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a small stone just to plug up that little hole, and I've got here is two little ones, and they can sit across the top of that hole, and they're not blocking it completely. Water and everything can drain through, but it just stops with a little bit of grit, this grit, from coming straight through out the other end. Okay, so tiny bit of grit just to allow it to have that good drainage at the base. And I don't want to go too mad because this one already has. When Philip has taken the cutting of that one, you can see it's got lots and lots and lots of perlite. So I'm going to just place that in there in an upright manner. I'm going to put it slightly lower down than you might think, because it's trying to root from higher up, which means that we'll end up with a weirdly leggy plant if I don't do that. And what I might end up with is, if I put it slightly lower down, we might end up with babies coming from the base. And also it was a bit of a lean, so we'll get a nice well-rooted plant. And again, with the tapping, just to settle the compost around it. I could push that one so it's slightly more central. It can be quite rough with plants, really. And then just topping it off with the grit again. And that's partly for the aesthetics, partly to stop vine weevil from getting in there, and just partly to give it good drainage around the neck of the plant. And there we go. To push it down slightly. Lovely. And last one. Same principle again. I'm just going to empty that out because, can you hear that robin? He's been my constant companion. Phil couldn't care less. So there we go. Now with this one, because it hasn't really got much in the way of roots going on, I'm just going to put the compost in and firm it down before the plant goes in. And then we're going to put some compost on top first. Yes, Mr. Robin. Okay, so here we go with this little chap. And literally all I'm going to do is I'm going to poke a hole, put him in there, and then just gently backfill around him with some compost. And tap. There we go. If you can see that, he's just sitting so that the roots are just below the surface of the soil, and the leaf itself is sitting just level with the soil, and hopefully the shoot will root and I will get more babies. And I know that's been a bit of a long-winded one, but thank you for bearing with me, and I shall see you again soon.